terrorist missiles. That is how Ukraine's president is describing an attack on residential buildings in a city in central Ukraine. Officials there report 11 people killed and more than 24 injured. This latest Russian aerial assault happening in both Russia and Ukraine, or as both Russia and Ukraine report intense fighting in the eastern Donetsk and southern Zaporizhzhia regions. Sam Kiley back with us this hour from the Ukrainian capital. It's very unclear at this point as to whether this and much anticipated counteroffensive has begun. You've been on the ground for weeks now in this stint and months over this conflict. In your assessment, what exactly is going on at this point, and what are the tactics here?
Well, I think in terms of the counteroffensive, Becky, you're absolutely right. It's deliberately unclear. That a lack of clarity in terms of the public domain is exactly what the Ukrainian government is trying to achieve. They've even got a campaign here telling people to keep it quiet. But at the same time, if we take a look at what is actually going on, we've seen the destabilizing raids by Ukrainian-backed Russian dissidents into Russia itself. We've seen the long-range attacks against the Russian logistics chain here inside Ukraine and more widely inside Russian territory. And now we're seeing an increased tempo of attacks in that southern front between Zaporizhzhia, which is Ukrainian-held, and the Russian-held city of Donetsk in particular. That southern front very, very heavily guarded and defended by Russia. The Ukrainians had left it alone now for many months, but they are now attacking it with some ferocity, not on a massive scale, still sort of one level up from the probing attacks that we'd seen before. But I think definitely they are now intent on trying to break through, and indeed have claimed some limited success in doing that. I think that's the sort of broader picture when it comes to the counteroffensive. Concurrent with that, and likely to be wrapped into it if it develops further in the favour of Ukraine, is the increasing advances that they're making to the southeast of Bakhmut. For example, if the troops in that region can join up with advancing Russian troops, they may be able to start to approach the very heavily defended city of Donetsk. Very much a prize over the, I think, much longer term as far as the Ukrainians are concerned. But Vladimir Putin's just come out with a statement saying that the destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam had, he said, unfortunately, he said, perhaps ironically, slowed the Ukrainian offensive plans, because the flooding of the Dnipro River Valley below the dam has meant that can't be used. Whether or not it was going to be part of the Ukrainian plan, we don't know, but it definitely is an impassable natural obstacle that is very much to the advantage of the Russians in terms of their defensive posture at the moment, Becky.
Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN's security nuclear agency, is in Ukraine. What's he doing, and what is he hoping to achieve?
Well, he has a number of monitors that are based permanently. They're rotated, but there is a permanent presence of the UN's IAEA at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which is, when it's at full capacity, the largest nuclear power station in the whole of Europe. It's only got one reactor, which is in a warm shutdown. All the others have been shut down. There isn't, at the moment, a concern that there is a clear and present danger to the nuclear power station in terms of access to the cooling waters from that dam above the now defunct or now burst Novokakhovka dam, because they have a cooling pond that is capable of lasting several months. But they will have to refill it. The water course below it is dropping rapidly, and there are concerns that it won't be possible to refill it. That is the sort of effect of the dam. But at the same time, this is a frontline position, Becky. I think he'll be seeking reassurances too from the Ukrainians, and no doubt from the Russians, that they're not going to get into a fight inside a nuclear power station. Now, the Russians fought their way in to that nuclear power station, which was abandoned by the Ukrainian forces, rather than have a serious battle over a nuclear installation that was running at a much higher capacity back in March last year. There have been assurances given by both sides that they would demilitarize this area ultimately, perhaps, but it is still a Russian base. It is still used by the Russians to attack civilian targets in particular, but military too on the other side of the Dnieper River. And as the Ukrainians push south, if they're capable of doing that from Zaporizhia city, and there's every indication that that's what they would like to do, clearly the presence of a nuclear power station basically on the front line is going to be absolutely top of the IAEA's agenda, Becky.
Yeah. Sam Kiley's on the ground. Sam, your reporting is so important. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this hour here on CNN. Connect the World with me, Becky Anderson.